by becoming rich.
Take all your money, buy Bitcoin.
I say when we
You can
sell.
wake up every morning and say GM.
GM. Tuesday, 25th of June. Daily levels. So, yesterday, obviously, we had a strong selling off, strong day of selling. Where was the path that I mentioned? Got close to the 200-day moving average. Which one was it? Let me see. Here we go. So I mentioned this yesterday, or actually it was on the weekend. Drew it up first for the weekly outlook. And moving down, if Bitcoin is going to go into a deeper sell-off, it's going to lose 60k convincingly before Friday, and then probably close Friday or close the options at the options expiry, which is Friday 8 a.m. UTC, below 60. However, that remains to be seen. I see signs of a local bottom potential, and then I also see some things that would have me not so convinced. First of all, strong reaction from BTC off the lows. Usually when you have a price, grinding lower, 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 bearish each way, falls down, dumps, no significant bounces, breaks through support levels, then reclaims a level very quickly. So reclaim that level very fast. It would tell me that most of what happened down here was just leverage capitulation, not an indication of spot selling or further weakness into those lows. There was a lot of selling yesterday. You see people online are talking about, there was $3 or $4 billion worth of selling, net delta yesterday, which lines up perfectly with how much Mt. Gox distributions will be, and it was people hedging for it and blah blah blah. If that's true, then I think they've hedged majority of it through shorts, not through actual selling of coins, because of course they don't have the coins yet. I didn't see any super heavy spot selling. People talked about this super heavy spot selling yesterday. I didn't really see it. This was more of a derivatives led move once the liquidations began. I think the spot selling was heaviest last week. So I look at it this way. It's quite clear at this point that the Mt. Gox news and the government German selling and all that kind of stuff, it's quite clear that stuff got front ran. And that's why we had this one-way step down market, no support. This was spot selling. It was quite orderly, it was quite efficient, it was a heavy market, there was ETF outflows, Coinbase was trading at a significant discount to other exchanges. And then Sunday night going into Monday, we got the leverage flush where it started to break and longs were forced to close rapidly through liquidations. So the last part of this was just a leverage flush, hence the bounce. So we know that for sure, that the last part, as it tends to be, the last part is generally led by liquidations. There was a push down here, which had the highest liquidations. We then push lower with much lower liquidations, indicating a lick divergence. And if there isn't sufficient spot selling in there, price will find itself a bottom temporarily. Or could be the actual bottom, but unlikely. Generally, you come back for retest. Now, what tends to happen in the short term is that when it bounces and then it starts to pull back, people get scared because they've just seen all the pain for the past 2 weeks and they start to short or sell prematurely. And then Bitcoin doesn't go down quite yet and it pushes another couple of legs higher. That's quite common and it's what I would expect to see. But let me look at some of these drawings from yesterday just so I can remind myself of a few of these paths that we had mapped out. So mentioned one where we collapse all the way down through 58. That is still a possibility, although the reversal might delay that for a few days. The other would be to chop around in this area between 58 and 62. That's my highest probability outcome at the moment. And I don't think we go anywhere near 65 anytime soon. I think that most likely what's going to happen here is potentially we go lower, but I don't need these paths anymore. I think that what we're looking at here is BTC losing the value area from this distribution up here, right? So it's lost that key level, that key zone of 62 to 70. And now we're in the lower end where there is definitely still support below, at least interim support. And there's going to be resistance up there. And we see some form of chopping around in that area before either it confirms a bottom or it confirms for a breakdown. I expect some, probably you could say a week or two down here. Maybe, let's say a week, if it doesn't see immediate continuation. The paths I expect to see, I think the next move of BTC will be all important here in terms of what you can expect. I do think that we come back to this level, like we do come back to these lows for a retest at some point, or at least close to them. But it's important to see what happens with BTC in the immediate term. So if Bitcoin is unable to show any strength like this, I think it will chop around like that. You'll eventually make your way back to the lows. And that's the kind of setup that leads to the breakdown, right? So if Bitcoin is not able to clear above this level here, it bounces up into resistance, finds resistance, isn't able to hold, nobody's stepping in to buy. It just bounces whenever people get too short, it squeezes them. Then we go back to the lows, people say double bottom, but the bounce is unconvincing. And this is that very typical, bounce, 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 like a ball, bouncing lower and lower and lower and lower, and then it breaks down. That's like the weakest path you can see. That would be the outcome that would cause the most pain in terms of probably the near term. So be watching for that. For me, I think Bitcoin is probably going to hold above today's daily open. That's quite a simple one, 60,200 area. And if it's going to do that, then you can see it building itself up into more of a typical two-leg structure, at least two legs, if not three. So we've had the first push up. This is the first consolidation. What you would expect to see would be something like this, where it chops sideways, maybe as a fake out to the downside, but then pumps up through, and then begins to do the same up here. And from there, you see where price is going to go. So that's a very common type of move you'd see here. It chops, 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 chops. People get themselves all caught up in knots, bullish, bearish, bullish, bearish. It dips down like it's going to go lower, and then it pushes higher. That's just, again, and this doesn't automatically mean that the market's bullish by any means. But I just look, with these strong reversals at the lows, when price comes down and it reverses strongly after, a very significant decline, it quite often leads to a longer squeeze and a squeeze that goes higher, which could be anywhere as far up as back up to that trend line, back inside it, back to retest the value area low, maybe even push higher towards 65 in a very strong move. It all depends. But those would be the ones I'll be watching for. If you start to see Bitcoin within the next day or two heading back towards that low for a double bottom, it's probably a sign of continuation. If Bitcoin's not going to do that, it probably doesn't go much below 60. Right? It probably comes back down towards this area like I've marked in black and doesn't go much below that. And otherwise, you can see the same thing, but just with a continuation squeeze sooner. So this is like your very aggressive squeeze would start pretty much from here. Squeezes straight up, has a pullback, squeezes up again. And that's that kind of aggressive two-legged structure where you have not much of a consolidation here. Doesn't consolidate, pushes straight up, squeezes, squeezes, squeezes. That typically actually leads to price going lower. But for sure, if it does that, it's going to come back to the lows. Even if it's bullish, it's going to come all the way back. Because it squeezes up so fast, it leaves behind an inefficiency, and it comes all the way back down. So I'll show you what I mean with some of these on a 4-hour chart. if I go back just to any bull market or even in bear markets, happens in both, both phases. So see an example here. Right, here's a very strong squeeze off the lows that fails at the very next resistance. Right, and if you go, I actually need to change charts so I can do replay mode so you can actually see the nature of it. Right, so remember what this one looks like. We've had a strong sell-off all the way down and an initial strong reaction off the lows. I think this is going to set up to go lower, by the way. I'm still of the opinion that Bitcoin breaks down lower, although that 58k pivot was a good level, and so if it retests, and the reason that 58k is a good level is because it was the February 2021 highs. If you remember way back when we were below 30k and we started to break out, I talked about the 34,900, you remember that, 40,800, 48,000, and then 58. It's actually technically 58.3. Those levels were laid out for various different reasons. Some of them on a weekly. When you look at, in the case of here, as we go, I think it was that one, was it? No, 48.8 was over here. No, sorry, 48 was just 48 flat. We have 40.8 was one of them over here. And you can see how the interplay happens with those. And then 34.9. This was the main level I traded off on the way up. So you can see some of these interim levels. The last swing low that held, that was the last possibility for Bitcoin to be bullish in this market, where you could have said this was a range low and we're going to go to new highs, and that failed. We had 48, which was the peak of the Luna buying. This is when Luna were desperately buying Bitcoin before it all collapsed. So that's an important level. And then 58, that was 58.3, was the February 21 high. That one matters more to me than the others because that's when the actual impulsive blow off top ended. Right? That was the last big full bullish candle before a sell off and then a distribution. This was all bearish price action, as we know. This was the last point at which it was truly impulsive bullish action. And so that's basically where the bulls could carry it. The bulls carried it there, and then the bears pushed it above for a couple of distributions. So you zoom back in, you can see on the way up, flipping that 34.9 led to our next move up. We then flipped 40.8, held, dipped below it. Didn't get a retest on the reclaim. 48 obviously stopped the market at the ETF launch, and then we broke through it. That's a level that hasn't been retested either. That would be one to watch if we did break down lower. But then that 58 came in. We held with daily closes right at that level back in May, and we've come back down and touched it again yesterday. So that for sure can be the level and could be the bottom. For that, I would like to see price move up, come back, hold it, and confirm to shift back to a bullish structure. In that, I would look at the daily bands, which we're now significantly below. I think Bitcoin can probably, if this is holding, Bitcoin can probably rally into the daily bands at some point in the next couple of weeks. Probably reject off them initially, back for a retest, and then when it comes back above them and flips them, and you look at the daily bands and they're, back here and they're flipping green, I think that's where you actually look at lift off for the next leg. That's if this holds. So looking back at some of these other levels, that's what I was doing before, yeah. When you see some of these rallies off the lows, whether it is a bearish continuation or a bullish reversal, it doesn't really matter. You can see some here that are within, or look at a couple of these that are within a bottoming structure, right? So this is actually important to note here. All of this price action was bearish, right? Every single bit of this is bearish. Looks bad. Everything's a lower high, weak bounces, failed rallies, right? But as we know, because the support held, it ended up being the absolute bottom before a massive run all the way to all-time highs. So when you look at some of these levels, it's important to note how many times price pushes down, has big rallies up, comes all the way back, has V reversals, comes all the way back, back for retest, V reverse again, pushes up into resistance, back down. So the concept of retest is so important. If we are now coming into that 58k level for the second time, but not the second time while it's been bearish, right? If you go back to where we're at right now, if you're thinking about it as this is the second test of 58, that's true. But in between, the market flipped back to bullish and got super long again. So I still think there's at least another test to come off that level. But in between now, if you're thinking about it as this is the second test of 58, that's true. But in between, the market flipped back to bullish and got super long again. So I still think there's at least another test to come off that level if it's going to hold. Because if you look back to like 2021, for example, these tests of 30k all happened while it was bearish. Obviously, massive collapse, retest when bearish, pushed up, couldn't even break above, retest again, bearish. In between here, we had that extra trap. And this is the trappiest part. This is the exit liquidity real trap, right? Everyone was bearish over here. Right? Everything looked bad. We lost 60k. Yeah, it's bearish. Then it rallied up and like, oh, that was just a quick sweep. Here we go. Away we go. Boom. There's certainly been enough of a shift, right? You know, the market going from 72 down to 58 in the space of 3 weeks is a solid move. It's definitely enough to cause a local bottom. But I don't think it's the bottom yet. Still plenty of... I think a lot needs to happen before that can confirm. And I don't think Bitcoin is moving down just because of whatever fucking Mt. Gox distributions or German government selling. I think we're also getting into a risk-off phase across the markets. So the dollar is consolidating near the highs, hasn't rolled over yet, right? So you really, if you want to see the dollar, you need to see a breakdown from that level, break below 104, break below at least 105. So the dollar remains strong, which can signal risk off. The stock market, again, put in another selling day on Monday. The Nasdaq weaker than the S&P, which is led mostly by Nvidia weakness, which is extreme. Nvidia has now put in what could be a top. And that doesn't mean that crypto has to go lower right away. There's been a big divergence in them. And you could look at it on the other way and say that Nvidia topping can equal not a crypto bottom, but could equal that crypto is getting closer. Because that has played out a couple of times where Nvidia's top has led to Bitcoin and crypto rallies. But there's very small sample set on that. So I would say it's actually just more likely that if the stock market's going to pull back, crypto will probably continue to have weakness. Now, what you want to see, and I've seen this a bunch before, is if you see a divergence over the next couple of weeks, let's imagine the Nasdaq is probably more relevant here. Say the Nasdaq pulls back, right? Just a regular pullback, pulls back, and then goes again, right? So summer sort of typical correction. And crypto doesn't. Crypto moves like this throughout that same period. That's a big sign of the strength, relative strength coming back to crypto after it was significantly weaker. Because remember, while Nasdaq was on all of this run, Bitcoin fully retraced its move. So they're not going to move one for one, nor should they, unless there's some kind of major risk-off event globally, you know, like war, proper war breakout, or whatever. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's pretty much just regular seasonality here. As I talked about on Weekly Outlook, stock market tends to top in March, June, or September in an election year. So potentially this is it now. Maybe not. Maybe there isn't a correction until next month or even September. But I think that all of this currently is pretty much as you'd expect. Now, meme coins bounced really hard. And I see people now, all over Twitter just talking about how it's meme coin season and This is fucking... Basically, like, after stuff has gotten crushed and been completely wrecked and just drifted down only for weeks and weeks and weeks, and there's no fucking way that anybody made money long here, all of a sudden now everyone on Twitter's like, oh, this is it. You didn't panic sell, did you? I was like, what do you mean? Like, people are... Twitter's just full of retards with fucking, you know, engagement baiting nonsense. They're like, oh, ready for the bottom, ready for the big bull run. You didn't miss it, did you? You didn't fucking panic and sell. You didn't give your coins away. Blah, blah. It's like, no, this shit's just bearish going down. Like, don't get me wrong, WIF can rally, but it can also rally just there and just be a lower high, right? Can have a very strong squeeze. Probably will have a strong squeeze if Bitcoin goes up, and just bait people again. So don't fall for those traps. But the from a sentiment perspective, I look at it and people are like, oh, memes are so much stronger than Bitcoin. That's a good thing. It can be a sign of continuation for altcoins, you know, in the near term, but it's more likely just that this stuff got crushed way harder because it's trash relatively compared to Bitcoin, and it's bouncing because sellers have capitulated. And so that obviously can lead to a rally, because if sellers had capitulated so much that some of this stuff made higher lows while Bitcoin made lower lows, then it can go back up. But that's not the same as saying this is the bottom and we're in a new bull market leg. Bull market legs don't begin like this, right? This is either a downtrend, which is going to have a lower high and then a further downtrend, or it's going to bottom out and it's going to have a sideways phase, and that might be the bottom, or it might not. Like, that's what this move is. The whiff, and it's not really even about whiff, I just see it's like fucking, there's just so many grifters on Twitter, right? Like, these Twitter supposed traders, they're not traders, they're fucking just dumping on you, because that's all they do. They get a big following and then they shill dog shit and dump on you. And like clockwork, especially happened with Popcat. You've probably seen this if you're on Twitter, like with Popcat, and it's going up, that's fine, but coordinated shilling is so obvious to spot. Like, I've seen 15 accounts all posting at the same time about Popcat within a few hours of each other. So if you don't think that that is a cabal, a fucking cartel coin, then good luck with it. I mean, you can be exit liquidity if you want. Some of this stuff will pump. Nothing better than pumping a shit coin when the market's bearish, because it gets more attention. Just understand what you're playing. And I mentioned this Doge and WIF kind of comparison from a while back. And this could be where WIF is right now. It could be there, or it even could be here. But in neither example is it going to go like that. And if it actually does go like that, it's far more likely to be that first path where it goes lower after, right? If there's a stronger rally, it's going to bait people in, and then it's going to fail, and then it's going to go lower. If the bottom's in, you actually want to see it behave more like that. You actually want to see it just kind of grind its way higher. And especially if people are bearish, right? If these coins start to grind their way higher, people are going to keep waiting for the next sell-off, and they're going to try and short it, and short it, and short it. And they're actually by far the best setups. So be mindful of that, because when the market moves and it makes people very emotional, and then it looks like, oh, this could be a bottom, that was a good reversal day, people think that this is like a great thing, or it just goes up, straight up. But it's not, because it goes straight up, people take profit, and then it can actually lead to a new low or a round trip all the way back down, which again, for trading, brilliant. But don't get trapped into these fucking, you know, don't mistake a bounce for a bottom, is what I'm trying to say. If you're actually trying to find the bottom, you have to allow bounces to happen and wait for some form of retest or consolidation. It's very simple. And the reason I say that is because there's going to be many people watching this, waking up this morning thinking, is that the bottom? Did I miss it? Do I need to get in right now? Have I got no chance if I don't get in? It is not the bottom for many of these coins. For some coins, could it be the bottom? Sure, if Bitcoin has bottomed out here, I guess. In either example, or in both instances, the time to buy is not here. unless you're just taking a trading perspective, right? The time to buy is on a retest. I don't know how many times you need to see retests to understand, but they always happen, right? So all you do is you take whatever fucking coin it is. I'll take Sol. And you take your scary sell-off, whether it's in a bullish market or a bearish market, and you take your scariest sell-offs, and you think, well, should I buy here? Well, you wait, right? In Solana's example, it went lower. That wasn't the bottom. And then it pushed below, failed, came back above. You could have waited months, and there's a retest. Not at 13, at 16. Now, most people don't have the patience to do that, or just the wherewithal to actually hold it. But it comes back again to 13. How much longer? Like 8 months later? This is the part, and this is like, you're going to see this probably on some meme coins, or some just coins, right? Some stuff will rally super hard once we bottom. Just like Solana did from December until January 23. And then what did it do? Bleed for 10 months, right? January, February, March, April, May, June. Quick pump in July, August, September, and then bottoms out. After a 12-day rally. The market's brutal. Reaccumulation takes time. It doesn't mean this next phase will have to take 10 months or anything like that. But you saw this here, right? Solana had that big rally off the lows and people got excited again. And now it's come all the way back down and retraced. And it's fully retraced it. Is it going to go lower? Is it going to hold? You have to give it time. It's going to move up, back down. If it's going to break down, it's going to look like that. And then Solana is well and truly cooked. If it's not going to, if the bottom's actually in, doesn't look like any bottom I've seen, apart from the fact that you could say it's holding support, which I guess is fine. But, it's going to have to come up, probably reject at resistance, form a higher low, and then once it starts to make a higher high there, that's when you look at Solana as being bullish again, right? There'll be a low into a high, forms a higher low, because I wouldn't expect to see this same support tested a fourth time, considering that you could also class that as one, right? Sets the level, 1, 2, 3. A fourth time, I would probably expect to see a higher low instead, and prices just grind up. And I think that grind